Hi, I'm Dr. Bryan Walsh. If you are taking Ozempic or are thinking about taking Ozempic, or you're a practitioner who are working with people who are using Ozempic, there's a single problem that nobody's talking about with it and basically all the other forthcoming GLP-1 agonists that I think what you see the studies I'm about to show you, more people should be having a conversation about. So the first thing I want to say is what this is not is talking about the things that are being talked about regarding this. Things like pancreatitis or gastroparesis or nausea or rebound or weight gain after somebody goes off of it. There's some people that suggest there might be suicidal ideations while using it, a whole bunch of things. I'm not talking about any of those things. That's fairly well characterized in the scientific literature. And I'm not going to talk about that. There's one, I believe, true problem with Ozempic or any of the other GLP-1 agonists, and that is that they're effective. Now, you may say, well, wait a minute, how is being effective a problem? What we have, when you look at the history of weight loss medications, it goes back to about 1892 when they first figured out how they could synthesize thyroid hormone, which caused hyperthyroidism. There have been dozens upon dozens of medications used for weight loss that have all essentially been pulled off the market for one reason or another: pulmonary hypertension or valvular issues of the heart, or again, suicidality, or overly stimulating sympathetic medications, um, or they just didn't work. And so, for the first time in human history, it looks like we might be on the cusp of finding certain medications, these GLP-1 agonists, that actually work. And therefore, if they work, there's a lot of money to be made. Companies will come out with less expensive versions or a different kind of means of, instead of injections, it might be oral. But what we're looking at is a lot of people potentially taking these. Again, you may be saying, well, what's the problem with that? Well, there is a problem when it comes to successful weight loss. And this is well characterized in the literature. I'm going to show you just one study right now and kind of go through this with you, but it's one of many. And that is that when people lose a substantial amount of weight, like they can with something like Ozempic or the other GLP-1 agonists, that internal levels of stored environmental pollutants go up. Now, let's take a look at one of the studies. So here's a study that says increased plasma levels of toxic pollutants accompanying weight loss induced by hypocaloric diet or bariatric surgery. Now, the study consisted of 3 different groups of Caucasian males. There was a control group that had a low BMI, an obese group that had a BMI between about 30 and 40, and then a morbidly obese group that had a BMI greater than 40. This paper says that in most cases, individuals with diabetes, hyperlipidemia, hypertension, and obstructive sleep apnea have shown a complete resolution and great improvement of comorbid risk factors. What that says in English is that, generally speaking, an overweight person, when they lose weight, many of their chronic conditions go away. And again, you might say, well, what's the problem with that? Well, several recent studies, according to this paper, however, have reported that after a hypocaloric restrictive program, low diet like or low calorie, like one might be eating on semaglutide or Ozempic or any one of these things, the plasma organic chlorine and pesticide concentrations, which are potentially toxic pollutants, increase with each 10% of weight loss. They go on to say that toxic pollutants are associated with different adverse effects, such as, and not limited to, breast cancer, reproductive disorders, immune function alterations, thyroid function impairments, and neurodevelopment and neurobehavioral alterations. Now, in terms of, if you look at the graph here, what they did is they demonstrated a number of other studies in addition to their study showing that in hypocaloric dietary interventions or in something more invasive like bariatric surgery, in every single case, every paper on humans and animals, when they fast or go hypocaloric or have some kind of bariatric biliopancreatic surgery, levels go up. And you can see on the bottom here, they can go up considerably as time goes on. The findings of this particular study were that the higher the BMI and the age of the individual, the higher the initial level of organochlorines in their system. The greater the weight loss, the greater the levels of organochlorines increase. What that means is it was a negative association. That means that the more weight that was lost went down, the more the serum levels of organochlorines or environmental pollutants went up. They go on to say that more research is necessary, that previous studies suggest that some toxic compounds may not be easily eliminated from the body. Now, a lot of people say, oh, that's fine, they'll go up and you just get rid of them. That's not true. There's many papers that suggest that. Raising concerns about the health of individuals after weight loss interventions. The thing is, that's just one study, and there are many, many more out there. Well, then the next question then arises, well, are there any short term, like within weeks to months, of risks of these increased environmental pollutants? And in the short term, let's take a look at a paper: Energy Balance and Pollution by Organochlorines and Polychlorinated Biphenyls. This paper states that organochlorines are fat soluble chemical compounds resistant to degradation so that they are stored in the adipose tissue of practically every organism on the planet. Accumulation of these compounds in the body seems to be related to fat mass, obese individuals having a higher plasma organochlorine concentration than lean subjects. During body weight loss, and this is what we're talking about, lipid mobilization and a decrease in fat mass result in, here's the bottom line, increased concentrations of organochlorines in plasma and adipose tissue. They go on to say that organochlorines have adverse health effects. For example, they have been associated with altered immune and thyroid function and with some types of cancer. And these compounds may reach their target organ whilst in the circulation. Their increased plasma during weight loss might be associated with some physiological changes occurring during weight loss. Well, what are some of those changes? Relationships have indeed been reported among, and this is referring to other papers, among weight loss induced increases in plasma organochlorine concentration, and here we go, and decreased tritothyronine, which is T3, the most sort of active form of thyroid hormone, resting metabolic rate, and that's how many calories you burn just throughout the day, and skeletal muscle markers for fat oxidation. And really what that means is your skeletal muscle's ability to burn fat for fuel. So they go on to say further, although further studies are needed to assess the causality of these relationships, they raise concern about some potential undesirable effects of weight loss. Indeed, the effects of organochlorine on energy balance could complicate body weight loss and even favor weight gain. Now, some people might say, well, yes, when you go on a hypocaloric diet, your resting metabolic rate does go down, and that is true. However, when you take a good look at many of these studies, um, there's an additional effect that has been shown where the higher, again, a negative association, the higher the organochlorine concentration goes internally during the weight loss, the lower T3 goes down, more than expected based on a hypocaloric diet, or the resting metabolic rate will go down farther than, the sleeping resting metabolic rate goes down further than the hypocaloric diet would suggest. Now, here's just a graphic that shows, here you have adipose tissue, OC stands for organochlorines. During weight loss, it goes up in the blood. That can reduce a number of things that are all related to metabolic rate, and it not only causes weight regain, but also slows weight loss while you're trying to lose weight, which some people call it the Ozempic plateau. Well, is it due to metabolic rate or is it due to something else? So in the short term, it does seem to negatively impact metabolic rate, thermogenesis, and the ability to burn fat as fuel. The thing is, that's just one study, and there are many more on this subject. So then the next question becomes, well, are there any long-term, months to years or even decades, risks of increased environmental pollutants? Here's another paper. The lipophilic, that's fat-loving environmental chemical mixtures. So there are some things that are easily excreted in the body. Some aren't. Those tend to be the lipophilic ones that get along well with fat and tend to be stored in fat. Chemical mixtures released during weight loss, the need to consider dynamics. So this paper states that intentional weight loss can increase health risk in the long term. Now look at what that just said. It says basically losing weight can increase health risk in the long term, despite short-term benefits, because human adipose tissue is widely contaminated with various lipophilic environmental contaminants, especially persistent organic pollutants. Recently, chronic exposure to low levels, not some massive exposure, to persistent organic pollutants has emerged as a new risk factor for common metabolic diseases and cardiovascular diseases. The paper goes on to say, the amount of persistent organic pollutants released from adipocytes, fat cells, to the circulation increases during weight loss, thereby increasing persistent organic pollutants exposure to other critical organs, all of your organs, reproductive organs, brain, heart, pancreas. Possible harmful effects due to release of persistent organic pollutants during weight loss are opposite to those usually expected from losing weight. It is speculated that this trade-off can explain the recent puzzling findings on intensive weight loss. The presence of persistent organic pollutants in adipose tissue adds a challenge to weight management, and an optimal strategy of weight management needs to consider both fat mass and the dynamics of persistent organic pollutants. And this final bit of this paper. Successful weight management is a very difficult task in the obesity epidemic. The presence of persistent organic pollutants in adipose tissue makes this even more challenging. The current prevailing approaches for weight management, focusing only on the reduction of fat mass, I just want to lose weight, may not be optimal because these methods neglect the release of persistent organic pollutants during weight loss. Such persistent organic pollutant release could compromise the benefits of intentional weight loss through lifestyle intervention. Now, here's the deal. Those were human trials. I generally don't like to use mouse studies or petri dish studies because I don't think there's a whole lot of correlation. Interesting to talk about, think about, but really I don't think we can make that one-to-one correlation. I say that because there are a few studies that have been done on animals, specifically mice, in this area that can't be done on humans. And so I do think that the results of this at least should give us consideration that maybe this is happening in us as well. And the short version is they will take mice. They will, in some cases, inject them with some kind of environmental pollutant, like a dioxin. In the study I'm about to reference, they were in female mice, and they took out their ovaries, so they weren't able to produce estrogen anymore. And then they will fast these mice. And what was found was, against the control mice, who were injected with a dioxin but didn't fast, is levels of that injected environmental pollutant went up when they fasted. That's not surprising. Again, there's dozens of papers that show this in both humans and animals. And when it went up, it wasn't excreted more than the other group who didn't have higher levels because they didn't go on a fast. Now, you also might be thinking, well, I'm not fasting, I'm just eating less. It doesn't matter. We're talking about hypocaloric eating. So it didn't get excreted more. And there's plenty of papers on that as well. These things don't necessarily, for a whole bunch of reasons, get excreted as easily as one might think. And then the second piece is estrogen sensitive tissues, like the uterus of a mouse, which most people don't think about, actually increased in thickness. It responded to as if estrogen were there, even though they no longer had ovaries. And that's is suggested that there's some estrogenic effects of some environmental pollutants, and that in the levels that are released from stored tissue during a hypocaloric diet were enough to actually cause an estrogenic effect on estrogen sensitive tissues. So I'll leave it at that. There are some studies that have been done on animals like that. None can be done on humans, obviously. But it's something that we need to think about, that if we're on a weight loss program or something like Ozempic and it's effective and we're losing weight for the first time in our life and we're midlife, we're a little overweight, we've been accumulating these things for our entire life, that could that be happening in us? I think it's a question we need to think about. So what are the long-term consequences? It seems that there's enough evidence to suggest that intentional weight loss can have potential long-term negative consequences due to the release and redistribution to different organs of stored environmental pollutants. So then the question becomes, who's at risk? Well, based on a number of papers, environmental pollutants tend to be higher in older, which makes sense. There's more time for us to bioaccumulate these things. We've been on the planet longer. More overweight, which also makes sense because we have the storage depots in order to store these things, and sedentary individuals. Now, there's some interesting papers on exercise and how that might actually help prevent the accumulation of some of these things for a whole variety of mechanisms, which I won't get into here. On the other hand, it tends to be lower in younger, leaner, and more active individuals. But the question becomes is who actually wants or needs to lose weight? It's those very people, older, larger, and generally more sedentary, are the people that want. So the people who want to lose weight, who want to use things like Ozempic, typically are the ones that are at the highest risk for this thing that we're talking about here. So why does this happen? I'm going to go into this quickly for those that are interested. Adipose tissue, or fat, is primarily known for its energy storage. It's been seen for a long time as something that the body, it's stored energy. You can burn fat for energy, you can store fat, so it's a storage form of energy for future use when you need it. It's primarily known for energy storage, but is also cited for the accumulation of persistent organic pollutants, and also has an additional toxicological function. Human exposure to persistent organic pollutants is inevitable. What does it say? We're all exposed to this stuff. This is not fairy tale science. This is, if you look at there are dozens of papers on this subject. We all have exposure to environmental pollutants, period. Especially as their lipophilicity, which is that fat lovingness again, allows them to bioaccumulate in adipose tissue, leading to increased body burden in individuals with obesity. Bioaccumulation refers to the buildup of substances in the body, particularly those that are not easily metabolized. Some of those environmental pollutants. During weight loss or fasting, lipolysis can release stored persistent organic pollutants into the bloodstream, potentially leading to health risks. The paper goes on to say that even in the absence of weight loss, persistent organic pollutants can dynamically equilibrate, leading to continuous low level exposures and might negatively influence health. Now, what that means is now some people will say the reason why you can't lose weight is because you have a bunch of toxins and your body doesn't think it can deal with those toxins. So it's going to store them until you're healthier and it feels like it can release them. That's not true. That there's a steady release of these, and there's papers that suggest this as well, steady release of these things as long as you have less in your blood than you do in your fat cells. If that's the case, they slowly tend to leak out over time. During weight loss, however, saturated lipids are mobilized from adipose tissue. Fats come out of your fat cells, which can also release stored persistent organic pollutants into the bloodstream. This sudden influx can increase the concentration of these toxicants in circulation, potentially exacerbating health issues. Can you see the theme of this so far? The mobilization of persistent organic pollutants during lipolysis may negatively impact adipose tissue and other target organs, potentially offsetting the positive health benefits typically associated with weight loss. We're told weight loss is good, and I'm not debating that. Generally speaking, a lot of bad things, comorbidities, chronic diseases, either get better or go away completely when people lose weight. However, there is this other piece that is exists. This exists. There's dozens of papers on this. And as I said in the beginning, the fact that so many people are using Ozempic because it seems to be a relatively low side effect profile medication that is actually works for weight loss, that we might have more and more people using these over the next 5 and 10 years, depending on what happens, is we have more people that might be exposing themselves to these very things that we're talking about. So far, Ozempic is probably here to stay, and researchers are now in a mad dash to find similar effective and safe weight loss drugs because significant weight loss increases the circulating levels of stored environmental pollutants in the short term. That seems it might negatively impact weight loss by negatively impacting your metabolic rate while you're trying to lose weight, and in the long term might negatively impact overall health. The older, larger, and more sedentary somebody is, the more likely this is going to happen. And this is all because we are surrounded by environmental pollutants, which get stored in us partly due to the toxicological function of adipose tissue. So, the solution, it seems, there are a number of evidence based scientific studies on humans, by the way, suggesting that there are ways of mitigating this increase of environmental pollutants associated with weight loss. There's things that you can do with your diet, with your lifestyle, and with a handful of supplements that might actually increase your body's ability to get rid of some of these now increased environmental pollutants, because for the first time in your life, you're actually successfully losing weight over a period of months, not just a New Year's resolution, because we have a medication, a GLP-1 agonist or Ozempic or Wegovy, that help you eat less, and therefore you're more successful with this. Now, because of all this, I've put together a program called Ozemplan. You can visit it at metabolicfitnesspro.com. But this program covers in far more detail those three major problems. Let levels go up. In the short term, it causes some issues. In the long term, it causes some issues. Why it happens, who it happens to. But most importantly, I outline actual papers, scientific papers, using human beings, showing that certain dietary lifestyle interventions, as well as certain supplements, might actually help to increase the elimination of some of these now increased stored environmental pollutants, ultimately, so that you can get the benefits of weight loss, but without any of the negative potential side effects of that. Thank you so very much for your time. I hope to see you on our website and in this program. And as always, thank you and God bless.